Welcome, and thank you for joining the Strategic Account Management Association for the SAMA webinar series. Today's topic is Defining and Assessing Strategic Account Manager Competencies with Shaquille Barmal, President Canada with the Summit Group. My name is Elizabeth Cornell, Director of Knowledge and Programming at SAMA, and I'll be your host today. Here's a little information about today's guest speaker. Shaquille leads the Canadian practice of the Summit Group and heads its global sales and marketing effectiveness consulting practice. He has over 18 years of experience in sales and marketing strategy creation and organization change management. Before joining the Summit Group, he was a member of Purolator's leadership team, where he held various positions with responsibility for supply chain services, customer retention, and growth and sales effectiveness. Shaquille is scheduled to speak at SAMA's upcoming Pan-European Conference on March 13th in Paris on the topic of moving to strategic account management from competency definition to delivery. In addition, he is currently an adjunct professor at the University of British Columbia. Shaquille, it's great to have you with us here today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for having me. I always love the opportunity to connect with SAMA members. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I'm going to spend the next 55 minutes, including questions, sharing with you some work we've been doing and some insights we have around the competencies of a successful strategic account manager, and we'll share with you one specific example how you can assess those competencies based on some work we have done here in Canada. So let me get going by first asking you a question, and you'll see a poll. First question that we'd like to get you all to think about and answer is, which role do you think most closely aligns with that of a strategic account manager? There are several options below. There's 6 of them. Do you think the role most closely aligns with that of a CEO of a small or medium-sized company, a salesperson, a project manager, a team leader, a CFO, and a VP of strategy? Now, clearly, there's all of these roles kind of embedded in the SAM's role, but pick the one that you think is the most closely aligned.
We'll keep the polls open, Shaquille, for about 5 more seconds.
Okay.
And then we'll show everyone the results here. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Great. So I tend to agree with the 40% of you that said it most closely aligns with the CEO of a small or medium-sized company. Clearly, in some companies, the strategic accounts represent a very large proportion of revenues, and if you think about many small businesses in the, a small business in the range of a $5 to $10 million revenue range, clearly many strategic accounts actually exceed that. So I do agree with you. So the point being, if that is the role of a SAM, then you have to think about the competencies of a SAM in the same terms as you might think of that of a business leader or a CEO or a president. So let's continue on with that view in mind. We're going to talk about 3 things today. First is this whole element of competency being looked at from a customer-driven perspective. Although we often talk about how we are customer-driven or customer-focused, something happens when it comes to hiring and competency definition, and oftentimes we end up looking at it quite internally. So we'll share an example of how it can be looked at from the customer in. We'll share 3 dimensions of competency, as Elizabeth described: mindset, skill set, experience set. And we'll then share an example of an assessment for one of those dimensions being skill sets that we've applied in a real business setting. So let me start by talking about the customer in approach. Some of you may have seen the Summit Group's thinking around third box thinking. Nothing complex, for those of you that haven't, very simple. All third box thinking says is, in order to be focused on customer needs and everything you say, think, feel, do, smell when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you need to do is actually start by understanding what is it that your customer seeks, i.e. the third box. And once you understand what the customer seeks, then you work backwards to say, what is it that our customer cares about? And then finally, what is it that you and your company bring? Now, third box thinking can be applied in a number of different settings, the most simple and basic of them being, as you deal with a customer, but they can also be used for various internal business relationships as well as personal relationships as well. But the objective of third box thinking is to start from the customer's perspective, the end customer's perspective, and work backwards. So let me share an example with you that thinks about how you reverse engineer a strategic account manager's fit with a customer. So the scenario I'm going to paint for you is one that had a very large Canadian transportation company as the customer in the middle box. And specifically within that company, it was the C-suite, the CIO, the CEO, the CFO, that were the customers of that the organization that were being targeted by a strategic account manager for an enterprise software company. Now, if you take our third box thinking principles, the customer of the C-suite, the people they cared about, was the board of directors of this large company that owned a number of different companies, but their objective was to try to satisfy the needs of that board of directors. So the first thing that we talked about was understanding what is it that the customer seeks, in this case the board of directors. Well, what they were seeking for, it was very, very, very clear, is that board of directors was looking for a credible plan for profit growth. This company had stagnated with a very low percentage profit growth over the years and a very low profit margin, and they were looking finally for a plan that would convince them that this company and this executive team of the trucking company was able to take the company forward into the next 10 years. So that's what they were seeking. So then you go to the customer, the C-suite of the trucking company, and think about what they cared about. Well, they had three things on their agenda that they were looking for, first of which was they wanted to spend $50 million plus on a major IT overhaul on their kind of front-end systems, contract management, CRM, a number of other applications. They also were seeking approval for an acquisition that would strengthen one of their new lines of business, and that's the other area that they wanted to get some approvals on, is in further investment on new lines of business to diversify their risk from just their core business. So that's what they cared about. So now the strategic account manager looks at that and says, okay, well, what do I bring? Well, recognizing there was much more on the table than just the $50 million IT overhaul, which is essentially what drove the pocketbook for this strategic account manager and the company, they recognized that there was also the acquisition in play, there was a new investment in new lines of business, and there was a credibility issue that the board of directors was skeptical that this C-level could actually come back with a credible plan for growth. So the SAM looks inside their organization's cupboards and says, what else can I bring to the table beyond just scoping out this IT sale that I want to make? And they have a great team of consultants internally that help do some analysis around value creation and how you can reformulate your business across functions to drive greater value creation and profit growth. They have benchmarking capability where they can look at the best practices of their other client organizations to identify what are some companies doing around the areas of new lines of business growth and acquisition. And they have cross-functional experts that know not only just the IT elements of a business, but also know marketing, finance, and corporate governance. So bringing all that to the table, they were able to help put together a presentation. In fact, they took the lead role in helping to craft a presentation that the C-level of the organization was then able to take to the board of directors and ultimately get approval not only for the IT overhaul, but also approval for acquisition, and the new lines of business investment. So at the end of the day, that's how it works. Now, so you look at that and say, well, what kind of person does it take to bring forward, to recognize the need and bring forward that type of capabilities? And in essence, that's what we're going to be talking about today. There are three elements of SAM competency from our perspective, three dimensions of competency. And I've put them in the order of priority as we see them. First is mindset. Then is the skill set, the tactical skills they bring to the table. And third is the experience set. Now, we'll talk about these in greater detail now, but I wanted to emphasize the priority order. Mindset first. Reason being, mindset is actually the most difficult one to change. And therefore, we've put that as the one that's kind of your screener from a selection standpoint. Of course, the sweet spot, the perfect situation, is when you get alignment of all three, mindset, skill set, and experience set. And obviously, there's a very small pool of people out there in the world that kind of have a perfect balance of all three. Difficult to find, but ultimately that is the perfect balance. So let's talk a little bit about mindset. The mindset is the way that you look at the world, the way you define the world around you. Different words for it. It's your paradigm. It's, in effect, the way you interpret the things around you. And one would say that how you look at things drives everything. It's the difference between a proactive individual and a reactive individual. It's the difference between an individual that chooses to get things done and one that feels like a victim. That's one element of it. But we're going to talk through a few dimensions of the value of the mindset. The first element is the value creation mindset. The mindset that says, before I do anything, before I talk about my company, my product, me as an individual, I first focus on them. What does the customer care about? What keeps them up at night? What do they rely on to win? Before I move into us and define what is it that we bring, before moving on to identifying the fit between what we bring and what they care about, and ultimately providing proof, quantifiable evidence that we can make the impact. That's the value creation mindset. Sounds pretty intuitive, but one that not everybody seems to have as a mindset. That's element one from a mindset standpoint. The second element we define as strategic mindset. And that is the mindset that says I have to think beyond the immediate future. I have to think next year, 2 years, even 10 years down the road in order to identify what moves do I need to make now or over the next period of time in order to get to the ultimate destination, both for the company I work for, myself as an individual, and ultimately to actually help the customer that I serve actually grow in their marketplace. Strategic mindset also suggests that you have a comfort with ambiguity. As most of us know, that the business world is complex and you don't always have the information required, but a SAM that thrives often has this comfort with ambiguity and can chart a course even though the path is not always clear. And at the same time, being able to anticipate the outcomes, not only from the reaction to the moves they make, but potentially the reaction that their competitors or others within their customer organization will make as the market evolves. Just a quick pause there. Any questions so far at this point?
Don't forget that you can pose the question through the Q&A tab at the top, or if you're on the phone, you can press *6 to unmute your line. #6 to unmute your line and introduce yourself and ask a question. Nothing so far, I guess, Nikhil.
Okay. So the next mindset element that we want to talk about is resilience. Resilience is something, obviously, that, around the world we've been talking quite a bit about lately. So resilience is being able to not only overcome adversity, such as the economic downturn, the changes in the relationships that you have in the customer organization, internal obstacles, which is often a big challenge for SAMs, internal obstacles to get things done for the customer, and in general complexity. So the idea is not only overcoming this kind of adversity, but becoming better because of it. using the adversity to actually sharpen your approach, to sharpen your skill set, to sharpen the way you approach your customer and the world. That's the definition of a resilient mindset from our perspective. So far we have value creation, strategic, and resilient mindset. The next dimension is one of curiosity mindset, and we like to think of it as structured curiosity. So it's a very simple example of this would be the ability to look at a customer's business and say, let me ask some questions here to understand what's going on. First of all, what are the customer's key business issues and concerns? And because customers aren't always forthcoming in telling you that, you need the curiosity to be able to ask the right questions to uncover that, the curiosity to be able to do the right research to identify those issues, and sometimes they're still not explicit, and you have to be able to almost theorize what those might be. But, what are the customer's key business issues and concerns? And underneath each of those business issues and concerns, being able to ask the right questions, why is that issue and concern a problem? What are the consequences of success or failure in the area of that business issue or initiative? And we think of the term of the 5 whys. You have to be able to ask the question why 5 times to get the true root cause. Next is to identify what the customer is doing about that issue, that business issue or an issue. And finally, who has responsibility for it. Now, it takes a curious person, yes, but a person that's curious in a structured manner to be able to uncover the answers to those questions in a way that allows them to learn more and make an impact. The next area of mindset is a personal favorite of mine, and that's the self-aware mindset. If you think of the people that you know in your organization or in your personal life, how many of them truly understand where they need to improve and have a good sense of how they are perceived relative to the other people that they work with? Well, we've done a lot of research in this area, and oftentimes we find, if you look at these 2 charts on this page, that a lot of individuals, key account managers, salespeople, have a disjointed sense of perception. Many of them will rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 5 on a particular skill dimension as being very close between 4 and 5. Oftentimes we see that the managers tend to rate them lower than that, and customers even lower than that. Now, not to say that all strategic account managers see themselves this way. If you look at the second diagram, we've seen the key account managers have a much more closely aligned view on their competencies and the value they deliver relative to both their manager and their customer. In fact, they will have less of a perception than do their customers and managers. But what you're looking for in a CAM is one that is self-aware, that is closer to the CAM 2 perspective than the CAM 1 perspective. Any questions there?
Oh, that's a really interesting observation, Shaquille.
Thank you. It's interesting is that it's a very eye-opening one, and we'll share an example with you from another real account that demonstrates how over and over we've seen a large proportion of people on sales teams rate themselves very high while customers and managers rate them low. Moving on, the next one is a simple one, actually. It's the thought leader mindset. It's the mindset that says, I not only need to push the envelope for myself in learning as much as I possibly can about the industry, the business, my customer's business, the product, but it says that I also have to have a unique perspective, which I will then share. There are some key account manager programs and certification programs out there that some companies have, is that the ultimate test of your thought leader mindset is getting an article or a viewpoint published in an industry publication. For a strategic account manager, somebody that is, seeking to be respected, seeking to bring new ideas to the table, the thought leader mindset is a very important one. They have to have original opinion as to what are potential drivers of success or industry issues. Authenticity, an often overlooked one, and one that we spend a lot of time talking about in some of the programs that we do, is this idea of being yourself. It sounds very simple, but the essence is that when you get an alignment of your character, being, who you are truly inside, and your competence, a real perspective on your skills, you get a really high alignment between character and competence, which accelerates customer relationships. So it's those key account managers that are comfortable with who they are, who are confident being themselves and being real, can stand on their feet and think on their feet and respond to their customer using their own character, but at the same time obviously have high competence. Those are the ones that win in the marketplace. Those are the ones that have the highest value relationships and are able to get things done in customer organizations much more quickly, as well as in their own organizations, because they move with the speed of trust. And that is the mindset dimension, and I'm sure you can interpret that. You can add a lot more to the list, and because you can make that quite personal. But in our view, those are the few that have stood out as being the key mindset elements of a successful strategic account manager. So let me move to skill set. The skill set will probably be much more obvious to you, as there's been quite a bit of discussion around skill set. But let me share our perspective. The first element of skill set is quite simply, very commonly understood as business acumen. The understanding of how businesses make money. If you think about the fact that 40% of you said that the SAM role is most closely aligned to that of a CEO, clearly a CEO understands how businesses make money, understands what the customer what the customer relies on to win, and how they create value for their end customer. But importantly, they also have analytical ability. They have the ability to gain insight from financial statements and understand the key ratios and metrics that their customer evaluates themselves on. And this requires quite a bit of agility, because if they are managing more than one customer relationship, they do need the ability to interpret different types of ratios and metrics. And in fact, even when they're dealing with one customer and they're dealing with key decision makers across various functional areas, obviously marketing has a different set of metrics to manage than does operations. And so they need that type of ability and agility. And so business acumen is key element of a successful strategic account manager. Next is the ability to have consultative relationship skills. Now, this does not come easy. It's a term that gets thrown around, being consultative, having strong relationship skills. But we break down consultative relationship skills to 4 specific areas. First is the ability to have relevant conversations. The insight and discipline to come in and modify the conversation based on what's important to the person in front of them. To be able to come in potentially having an agenda, but abandoning that agenda when you realize that the person across from you has other needs and other things they need to talk about today. So that takes some courage and confidence, and it's quite simply, it takes the competency and the authenticity we talked about earlier. The ability to gain trust, not an easy thing, and it takes time, and it does come from being relevant, but the ability to gain trust from a customer in an accelerated fashion. The ability to be interested and not rely on needing to appear interesting. A lot of key account managers early in relationships with customers will seek to build credibility by talking about all the things they've done, all the industries they've worked in, and share examples from other companies. Now, there's a place for that, but it's usually not up front in the relationship. Initially, you have to be interested in what's going on with the customer's business in order to earn the right to have that consultative relationship. And the other element, obviously, is to listen and reflect, to confirm understanding. So 4 basic elements of communication skills are key drivers of consultative relationship skills. The next element is holistic solution thinking. This is the idea that they themselves have the ability to configure new products and solutions. So they need to have enough, and I put that in quotation marks, enough knowledge of the products the company sells, solutions. But, the truth of the matter is a successful SAM needs to be able to know who they can call on within their company for in-depth knowledge. It would be impossible for a SAM to have detailed technical knowledge in all the products that they carry, but at least enough to know what's relevant and enough to know who they can call on to get further detail. They need to be proactive in bundling, and they need to be creative to invent new ways of combining the products and services they have, as well as what we call offer enablers that might be in the company's cupboards, i.e. those things that the company doesn't necessarily sell but has expertise in order to combine them with the actual product or service they sell. So they need to have a holistic view of the solutions they create. Next skill, quite obvious one, is value articulation, the ability to resist spewing of specifications, features, and benefits. Features and benefits may work for, a frontline or field salesperson, but it doesn't work for a strategic account manager. The reason they're in that role is not to be able to sell product, so they're therefore not going to be spewing specs, features, and benefits. The ability to use customer language, to describe things in terms that the customer understands, and to explain impact in multiple ways. Because in some cases, customers will hone in on quantifiable impact and will look for that. Other customers will look for anecdotal or case study or examples within other industries. So you need to be able to articulate value in a way that's relevant to the person that's on the other side of the table. And the ability to create excitement or enthusiasm for your future that can't be seen. The product or solution that the company offers may not be in place, and therefore there needs to be some kind of excitement for a future that might exist with that product in the organization or with a partnership with a company that needs to be articulated. So that's value articulation. Another skill dimension is the ability to the team influence and leadership, and that's the ability to get respect without authority, i.e. the inspiring of people with ideas. And in a lot of ways, this is an internal-looking skill. In most cases I've come across, SAMs do not have direct reports, but they rely on a number of people, in some cases that have dotted line reporting relationships, to create and drive value for their customers. So being able to get respect without having that authority is critical. The ability to stretch people's thinking, to push them beyond where they are today without breaking their spirit. The ability to create a loyalty to a logic of an exciting vision, to resolve conflicts, particularly when it requires working across functional silos. And coaching collaboratively is critical because, again, if they don't have an authoritative relationship with somebody, they need to have a relationship where they can work together with an individual to improve their skill sets and collaboratively coach them. The other key element that doesn't often get talked about is a SAM's ability to identify talent, up-and-coming talent, because in some cases the best supporters of a SAM's strategy for customer value creation might be somebody that is embedded within a team that isn't getting visibility. So that ability to find up-and-coming talent and intelligence is key for a successful strategic account manager to have. One that we like is a simple term called being the great explainer. We have 5 C's of great explaining. It's the ability to be clear, to be candid and honest, to be concise, be able to send the right message in the fewest amount of words, be crisp. And another way of looking at it is to be very tight in your language and be impactful with your language and have impact defined in the language. And curious, be able to get others to be interested in learning more. At the end of the day, the people that win out there are those that take very complex topics and make them simple, are able to explain them in a way that is interesting and compelling. A great example would be Warren Buffett, who takes very complex economic principles and is able to explain them in a very simple way that anybody can understand. And that is key to being a successful strategic account manager. Finally, before, I'll check in for any questions in the first 2 dimensions, mindset and skill set. Any questions at this stage?
Don't forget you can use the Q&A tab at the top. Shaquille, I don't see any questions at the moment, but actually I had a question back a couple of slides on stretching your thinking without breaking someone's spirit.
Yes.
Could you just re-articulate that thought again?
Yeah. Okay. So, and then actually it was a SAMA member that I worked with recently that gave me that example. So I'll use that as an example. In that particular case, he was organizing a meeting for teams that were going to be supporting a new customer. And he had built a case study that was demonstrating to these members of the team how they wanted to work together to build solutions. Now, at first draft, the case study was extremely complex. And the idea was that, we want to demonstrate to the team how to move beyond where they are today, but the truth is that this case study is so complex that they would actually feel overwhelmed and feel incapable of responding. So the idea is to back up a little bit and, have a bit of a stretched thinking, but also make it simpler for them to be able to feel motivated that they actually could tackle the problem. Now, that's one example, but I'm sure we can all imagine situations, even with our children, where we want to challenge them, but you want to push them not so far that they feel overwhelmed or that they can't cope. So it's a fine balance to know how far you can push them.
Right.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so let's continue down on our path, and let's talk about experience set. The first element of experience set, and before actually I move into experience set, it's really important to recognize that, it's hard to get the perfect balance of experience. But at the same time, experience is not necessarily positions on a resume. Experiences are a combination of work, life, and volunteer experience that a person goes through, because it's about that experience which defines what a person is, not necessarily positions on a resume. So very important to recognize that. So let's first talk about a career-related experience. First is business leadership. If we are looking for CEO-type talent, obviously they need to be people that have managed a P&L or have had some element of starting a project up, have some startup experience. Potentially they might have managed a geography of people or been responsible for managing a product or a brand. At the end of the day, they've had to manage multiple resources and have been responsible for the metrics for leading those resources. The next element is people leadership, either formal people leadership or informal team leadership. They've gotten involved in special projects within a company, and some of the best strategic account managers are those that may have come from a sales background but then have moved into areas of finance or engineering or IT in order to get special project experience. Volunteer leadership, a great indication of leadership potential, those people that take the time to lead teams outside of the organization for nonprofit or for charity work. Mentoring, they have the experience and ability, and oftentimes you'll hear this from the people that have been mentored, nothing to gain for themselves, but they spend the time and invest in helping other people grow. Another area to look at is, what does an individual's peers, what do they say about them? Sometimes in organizations, particularly sales or key account management, you'll find that peers are actually competitors, all seeking to be the most successful in their company. But if you, in an environment like that where you can get peers that actually say positive things about the individual that you might be looking at, that is very, very much a good sign. And the last one, which is obviously very important, is strategic account managers often manage resources globally. The ability to gain respect and to get things done, leading people virtually outside their own geographic area, is key from a leadership standpoint. Next thing is industry experience. And I like to think of industry experience like a three-layer cake. One layer of a cake is great. One layer is good. One layer of that cake being, do they have experience in your industry? Well, that's good. If they have experience in your industry, that's wonderful. They can bring some value based on past experience. But better is your industry combined with customer industry? Do they understand the industry of the customer they will be serving? And that's better. But the best scenario is, in my mind, the three-layer cake, which says they have perspective in multiple industries. Because what that means is they have the ability to think outside the box and bring examples from other industries that can be relevant to creating value for their customer. So the ultimate industry experience package would be somebody that has not only your industry, customer industry, but multiple industry experience. And I would actually trade off experience in your industry and the customer industry for multiple industry experience. It'll show the variety and breadth of thinking. Operations and or finance. And the reason why I think that is a great element of experience is it demonstrates an experience with execution, particularly in the operations standpoint. They have the ability to understand not only, how to build a solution, but, sometimes the reality is getting things done in an organization, both within your own organization as well as the customer's organization. Experience getting things done. The next would be to be able to relate to the customer and their internal operations. That's a great element of, if you can understand, operations and finance, you can understand that in the context of your customer's organization. Clearly, the ability to quantify impact is strengthened by financial experience, as is both operations and finance people are typically measured on performance more quantitatively. Operational metrics or finance metrics. Having that experience often makes people comfortable with the concept of being measured from an impact perspective. I love this next one, and that's the experience with failure. And there's lots of stories you can ask in an interview setting, but experience with failure and what a person has learned from failure, is a key element of evaluation. You understand how they learn, what lessons have they learned from past failures. You get a perspective on how tenacious they are to persevere. It's kind of that view like resilience. How tenacious they are and persevere, how much they persevere in the face of failure. But really what I like is this anticipatory element. When you've seen risk and you've failed before, you are in a much better position to see the warning signs of failure occurring again, and then have the ability to correct course and mitigate risk. So wisdom comes from having failed before, and it allows you to avoid failure in the future.
This might be another good time to stop and see if there are any questions, Shaquille.
Great.
Anybody have any questions? I was wondering, Shaquille, based on your experience and any data you may have collected, which sort of experience is hardest to find in a great SAM?
I have found, well, I can think of examples of all of them, but I have found that the ones that folks look for, and I should say they don't look for it enough, and that's probably why they don't find it, is SAMs that have multiple experiences across industries, but also across projects within an organization. I often find that most SAMs come from sales backgrounds. And so I think the biggest area for opportunity is to open up the search and to open people up to the idea of having some non-sales experience in the resume. And that comes from special projects, but also other functional areas.
Right. We do have a question from one of the callers. If you want to press #6 to unmute your phone and come on and ask Shaquille a question.
Hi, this is Alex Wakefield. I think you're referring to my question.
Yes.
So Shaquille, my question is, I like your cake chart.
Yeah.
And you indicated you would trade off multiple industry experience with the company experience or your industry experience.
Yes.
I think that's a nice view. How receptive have you seen your clients have been to that view? So in other words, yeah, okay, go ahead.
And it does take a bit of a paradigm shift for sure. I think most people, there's great comfort, and it feels almost easier to evaluate somebody based on having deep experience in the industry. But, you know, like I said, a perfect situation would be to have all three tiers. But if I think about Sam's ability to think strategically, think beyond just what the solutions that have typically been offered in the industry, it's those that have the multiple industry perspectives.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's what I've seen. I mean, I like your view, but that's what I've seen. I just wanted your opinion. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Appreciate that.
And Alex, you can press *6 to remute your phone. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? I think we're good to go right now. Shaquille?
Okay. So failure was the last one in the experience set. So as we've looked across mindset, skill set, experience set, I still very strongly believe ideally you have all three aligned perfectly. It's not an ideal world. So then in that case, I say look in the order of sequence of mindset, skill set, and experience set in that order. But what we've done for some clients most recently is help them on the assessment of the skill set dimension. And given time, I'm going to focus on just that element right now. An assessment approach that looks at each of your individuals across the skill set dimension can look something like this. You know, a 4-dimension view that says, let me get a self-assessment from the key account manager as well as an assessment of their leader. That can be done in an online or paper-based fashion, survey fashion. Next, let me get a perspective from the customers that are managed. You can do that through a combination of interviews and online assessment. Let me do some one-on-one interviews with the key account managers themselves to get some real examples and some stories. And let me do some interviews of sales leaders and executives in the organization to get a perspective on the skill set of the various key account managers. So that's a 360-degree view of, or not really 360, but it's a multiple perspective view of a CAM's skill competency. So that was the approach that we've applied in a number of different settings. And then what we do, and I'm not showing the full picture here because it's quite detailed, is what you do is you define for each competency, you define what good, better, and best look like within the role. Now, in this case, you can see in this client's case, you can customize the competency dimensions. In this case, it was business acumen, relationship skills, product solution knowledge, value articulation, and 3 other ones. But it's key to have a crystal clear view in your mind as to what do good, better, and best look like. Reason for that, those dimensions actually end up becoming the dimensions you evaluate against in your survey. And then you're able to identify who fits in what profile, good, better, or best. So what I've got here is an illustration of summary output of an assessment. Now, this is an overall assessment of a number of key account managers. But this is what I talked about earlier in the self-aware mindset. What this represents is a curve that represents the number of individuals that rated themselves on a scale of 1 to 5. These are the self-evaluations. In this case, CAMs that rated themselves. And if you can see from this curve, if you get the message, is that across these 5 skill dimensions, they all rated themselves closer to the 3, 4, and 5, with the majority of people rating themselves a 4 and a 5 being excellent on a scale of 1 to 5. When you add on a layer of the managers' perceptions, you can see that managers are much more normally distributed in their assessment when they view the salespeople or the key account managers that reported to them. The peak, obviously, is around the 3, or mediocre, as we would describe it. It becomes very interesting when you layer in the customer's perspectives. As you talk to customers, it's a much more uneven, it's much more distributed across the range of 1 to 5. Very rarely did you see a perfect alignment of managers, customers, and sales reps in perception of skills. This is real data. This is probably data set of about, I would say, evaluation of about 400. people, but this is the interesting alignment that we've seen over and over again, regardless of organization size. I expect that there might be questions here.
That correlates, you know, with, I think, people's experience as well.
Well, that's...
No questions at this time.
Okay.
Gil?
Let's keep going. So, in essence, what you get from that kind of assessment is a prioritization. So this is basically the same data, but it allows you then to say, you know, what we did here was evaluate, rank order the percentage of people that were rated on a particular skill dimension at 3 or less on a scale of 1 to 5. So i.e., the more people that are seen as weaker on a particular skill dimension, the more important that skill dimension is to address, to improve upon from a development standpoint. So in this particular case, you know, 71% of customers rated the people's skill dimension around value articulation as 3 or less on a scale of 1 to 5. So clearly something that you want to address. Now, interestingly enough, half of the sales managers also thought skill dimension was weak. Only 20% of sales people or the key account managers saw that skill as being weak. But still, there's clearly an alignment across at least the customer and the manager. That's something that you want to be addressed.
Shaquille?
Yeah.
We do have another question, and it is, how is the distribution within the cultural aspect? Do you see differences, for example, between U.S. and Asian CAMs?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, that's not one I can answer because I haven't personally been involved in. I've been involved in both the U.S. and Canada, but I haven't done this assessment yet in Asia or Europe. But I can expect that there would be a discrepancy. I think I'm not sure as much if it's cultural discrepancy or if it would be corporate culture discrepancy. Clearly, different companies have had different emphasis in development in different areas. So I think it's more like a stage of development for the company in their strategy as opposed to a cultural difference. What I would probably say is culturally is we would see a difference in how forthcoming people are and how critical people are in either self-evaluation or in evaluating their people. So I'm sorry I can't properly answer that question.
Okay. I think we're good to go.
Okay. So in this particular example, what we also did was we brought together the executive team, CEO and his team, to look at where a company's strategy was going, and based on that strategy, their own assessment of where their organization and people were, to identify what were the key competencies that were going to be very important to develop going forward. And this chart just shows rank order for that executive team, how many people said which ones were most important. So that's another data point that we bring into this prioritization of competencies. So then the next view says, okay, well, let's look at alignment. Now, I'm fast forwarding. I haven't given you a lot of the detail, but that goes under each of these. But you basically then try to build alignment. And we say, okay, well, both customers and managers have said that business acumen is critical. Funnily enough, neither the rep or the executive mentioned that as being an area of priority. But then you look at the area of product service knowledge. We have alignment there that all three of those are important for customer rep. That's important for customer rep and executive, but not the manager. So you see how you get different perspectives based on the position. But at the end of the day, you still are able to build some form of alignment by saying that these 5 critically are the ones that we want to move forward and manage. Now, this mix of dimensions will be different for your company. This is just a snapshot of the particular company that I brought into this example. But you try to build as much alignment as you can around some areas. Now, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but for each area that we had, dimension that we had, business acumen being one of them, we had 5 to 6 specific areas within each one where you tried to get a little bit deeper understanding. So in this case, business acumen broke down into a comparison of, having knowledge of the industry and company's needs, or being able to make clear recommendations on ways to improve impact of investment. So you're able to get a sense of the percentage of people that are rated 3 or lower across those dimensions. You also can ask the question of the managers. Same idea. Questions look a little bit different, but the idea is to use your good, better, and best profile to dig down and get specific assessments on specific areas of competency within business acumen and all the others. So again, that's done across all the competencies. At the end of the day, you want to prioritize development. Here's one way to do it. What we did in this case is we took importance on the vertical axis as rated by the executive, and we looked at performance on the horizontal axis as rated by customers and managers. We actually dismissed the rating by the individual key account managers. But when you pull together the perspective of importance and performance on a view like this, you'll get to a place that says, you know, there are clearly some areas that we want to invest in further. And in this case, it became the 4 areas of value articulation, relationship skills, product service knowledge, and business acumen. Became the areas to address, to prioritize development. And so then basically you say, okay, well, those are the priorities to develop. We use the in-depth detail from some of the specific questions that we asked to say, okay, what within those areas are important. So in the case of value articulation, we discovered that it was really key to be able to get them to articulate the ROI of investment, the value statements, the ability to, from a product knowledge standpoint, to prioritize, to understand competitive product solutions, to the ability to bundle, et cetera, et cetera. For each one, you can drill down a little further to identify what are the specific areas to develop within them. The other recognition that you have to have is you can't have a one-size-fits-all development plan. Coaching and performance management to individuals is key at this level. You want to be able to tailor a development plan for each individual. You want to ensure that you're able to get customer assessments of each individual and custom tailor the development program. For the SAM, when it comes to development, there's some key differentiators for choosing the right solution for developing them. First of all, for SAM, training has to be pragmatic, not theoretical. Has to be applied and logical. Has to be simulation-oriented because it has to be give them the opportunity to practice, and again, not just theoretical. It has to be customized to the customer industry, allowing the opportunity for live opportunity application, potentially applying it to real customer scenarios, engaging the support team, because a key part of a successful SAM's job is the ability to engage other people in the organization. Therefore, within the training, you have to engage the support team, particularly in a simulation lab. There has to be sustainment built in and reinforcement built in, and clearly all the development has to be linked to the senior leadership level coaching of the individuals. It may sound obvious to many of you. With that, I'd like to wrap up, and we have, I guess, a few minutes to take some questions and can stay a little longer if we need to.
That's great, Shaquille. Someone have a question? Thought I heard someone come on. While we're waiting for any remaining questions, I'm going to put up the evaluation, which we would be very grateful if you would give us some feedback for. Shaquille, in terms of the set of skills around value articulation, I know from various calls from our SAMA members over the years that this is one of the most difficult pieces of their job is really articulating the value, and that one slide that you showed broke down some of the pieces of that, and I wondered if you had some thoughts around, you know, which aspect of that skill do SAMs find the most difficult, and do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I think the biggest, it's funny because I just did a workshop on value articulation this last week, and what you find is the ability to open up the, you know, whether it be value statement or whatever exercise you're doing, the ability to open up with a really solid understanding of what's important to that customer's business, the individual's business, seems to be the biggest challenge. Most people know very well what solution they want to sell, what solution they want to bring forward, and they can therefore, because when we think about value statement or value articulation, we think in order of what I described earlier as them, us, fit, and proof. So they do really well on the us portion, but they don't spend enough time on the them portion. So the best examples of articulating value I've seen are people that are able to have a very compelling kind of statement on understanding what's important to that customer's business, and maybe a little bit about what they bring without naming specific products or solutions, but then really being impactful on or having a really concise impact. What's the quantitative impact of what we can do? So value articulation, this biggest strength comes from your ability and discipline to resist talking about yourselves.
Do you think it has anything to do with the depth to which they know their customer? In other words, the effort that they've put in to do some intelligence and proper understanding of the customer organization?
That's a very good point, Elizabeth, and that is true. That is something that I often, when people come out of workshops, say, the biggest thing I took away is how important it is to know my customer really well. It's almost like you want to know them and then spend another hour after that doing a little bit more research just to make sure and validate. So that's a very good element, is investing that research time, not just research on the internet, but reading journals, the ability to set up meetings with other people in the organization to test ideas, and to bring that all together and into a knowledge of the customer. So that's a great point, Elizabeth.
Well, I don't see any further questions, Shaquille, and we're at the end of the hour. So in addition to any final comments you might have, I just want to thank you very much for being with us today and telling us some more about how to define the SAM competencies.
Well, I'm glad for the opportunity. Thank you again very much. Clearly, competency is a big topic and not one that can be done justice in an hour, but we move pretty fast. Hopefully, I'll see many of you at SAMA events in the future in March or May, and we can discuss these things further. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was really excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.